The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver. Chapter 6. Valentine's Day. The first killing frost of the winter came on Valentine's Day. Mattie's purple bean vines hung from the fence like long strips of beef jerky drying in the sun. It broke my heart to see that colorful jungle turn to black slime, especially on this of all days, when people everywhere were sending each other flowers. But it didn't faze Mattie. "That's the cycle of life, Taylor," she said. "The old has to pass on before the new can come around." She said frost improved the flavor of the cabbage and Brussels sprouts, but I think she was gloating. The night before, she'd listened to the forecast and picked a mop bucket full of hard little marbles off the tomato vines, and this morning she had green tomato pies baking upstairs. I know this sounds like something you'd no more want to eat than a mud and June bug pie some kid would whip up, but it honestly smelled delicious. I had taken a job at Jesus' Lord Used Tires. If there had been any earthly way around this, I would have found it. I loved Mattie, but you know about me and tires. Every time I went to see her and check on the car, I felt like John Wayne in that war movie where he buckles down his helmet, takes a swig of bourbon, and charges across the minefield yelling something like, "Live free or bust." But Mattie was the only friend I had that didn't cost a mint in long distance to talk to, until Luanne, of course. So when she started telling me how she needed an extra hand around the place, I just tried to change the subject politely. She had a lot of part-time help, she said, but when people came and went, they didn't have time to get the knack of things like patching and alignments. I told her I had no aptitude whatsoever for those things. And was that a real scorpion on that guy's belt buckle that was just in here? Did she think we'd get another frost? How did they stitch all those fancy loops and stars on a cowboy boot? Was there a special kind of heavy-duty sewing machine? But there was no steering Mattie off her course. She was positive I'd be a natural at tires. She chatted with me and Turtle between customers, and then sent us on our way with a grocery bag full of cabbage and peas, saying, "Just think about it, hon. Put it in your swing it till Monday basket." When Mattie said she'd throw in 2 new tires and would show me how to fix my ignition, I knew I'd be a fool to say no. She paid twice as much as the burger derby, and of course there was no ridiculous outfit to be dry cleaned. If I was going to get blown up, at least it would be in normal clothes. In many ways, it was a perfect arrangement. You couldn't ask for better than Mattie. She was patient and kind, and let me bring Turtle in with me when I needed to. Luanne kept her some days, but if she had to go out shopping or to the doctor, one baby was 2 hands full. I felt a little badly about foisting her off on Luanne at all, but she insisted that Turtle was so little trouble she often forgot she was there. "She doesn't even hardly wet her diapers," Luanne said. It was true. Turtle's main goal in life, other than hanging on to things, seemed to be to pass unnoticed. Mattie's place was always hopping. She was right about people always passing through, and not just customers either. There was another whole set of people who spoke Spanish and lived with her upstairs for various lengths of time. I asked her about them once, and she asked me something like, had I ever heard of a sanctuary? I remembered my gas station travel brochures. "Sure," I said. "It's a place they set aside for birds, where nobody's allowed to shoot them." "That's right. They've got them for people, too." This was all she was inclined to say on the subject. Usually, the people were brought and taken away by the blue jeans priest in the station wagon I'd seen that first day. He also wore an interesting belt buckle, not with a scorpion, but with an engraving of a small stick figure lost in a kind of puzzle. Mattie said it was an Indian symbol of life, the man in the maze. The priest was short, with a muscular build and white blonde, unruly hair, not really my type, but handsome in a just-rolled-out-of-bed kind of way, though I suppose that saying such things about a priest must be some special category of sin. His name was Father William. When Mattie introduced us, I said, "Pleased to meet you," making an effort not to look at his belt buckle. What had popped into my head was, You are old, Father William." Now, where did that come from? He was hardly old, and even if he were, this isn't something you'd say. He and Mattie went to the back of the shop to discuss something over coffee and pie, while I held down the fort. It came to me a little while later, while I was testing a stack of old white walls, dunking them in the water and marking a yellow chalk circle around each leak. I remembered 3 drawings of a little round man, first standing on his head, then balancing an eel straight up on his nose, then kicking a boy downstairs. "You Are Old, Father William" was a poem in a book I'd had as a child. It had crayon scribbles on some pages, so it must have been a donation from one of Mama's people whose children had grown up. Only a rich child would be allowed to scribble in a hardback book. I decided that after work I would go down to one of Sandy's New to You toy stores and find a book for Turtle. New to You was just like Mama's people, only you had more choice about what you got. After I had marked all the tires, I rolled them across the lot and stacked them into leaky and good piles. I congratulated myself on my steady hand, but later in the day, Mattie saw me jump when some hot dog Chevy backfired out in the street. She was with a customer, but later she came over and said she'd been meaning to ask what I was always so jumpy about. I thought of that column in Reader's Digest where you write in and tell your most embarrassing moment. Those were all cute. The day my retriever puppy retrieved the neighbor's lingerie off the clothesline. In real life, your most embarrassing moment is the last thing in the world you would want printed in Reader's Digest. "Nothing," I said. We stood for a minute with our hands folded into our armpits. Mattie's gray bangs were more salty than they were pepper, cut high and straight across, and her skin always looked a little sunburned. The wrinkles around her eyes reminded me of her Tony Lama boots. Mattie was like a rock in the road. You could stare at her till the cows came home, but it wouldn't budge the fact of her 1 inch. "Just don't tell me you're running from the law," she said finally. "I've got enough of that on my hands." "No." I wondered what exactly she meant by that. Out on the street, a boy coasted by on a bicycle, his elbow clamped over a large framed picture of a sports car. "I have a fear of exploding tires," I said. "Well, of all things," she said. "I know. I didn't ever tell you because it sounds chicken shit." I stopped to consider if you ought to say chicken shit in a place called Jesus is Lord's, but then the damage was done. Really, it's not like it sounds. I don't think there's a thing you could name that I'm afraid of, other than that. "Of all things," she said again. I imagined that she was looking at me the way you do when you first notice someone is deformed. In 6th grade, we had a new teacher for 3 weeks before we realized his left hand was missing. He always kept his hanky over it. We just thought it was allergies. "Come over here a minute," Mattie said. "I'll show you something." I followed her across the lot. She took a 5-gallon jerry can, the type that Jeeps have strapped on their backs, and filled it a little better than halfway up with water. "Whoa," I said. While I wasn't paying attention, she'd thrown the heavy can at me. I caught it, though it came near to bowling me over. "Knocked the wind out of you, but it didn't kill you, right?" "Right," I said. "That's 28 pounds of water. 28 pounds of air is about what you put in a tire. When it hits you, that's what it feels like." "If you say so," I said. "But I saw a guy get blown up in the air once by a tire all the way over the Standard Oil sign. It was a tractor tire." "Well, that's another whole can of beans," Mattie said. "If we get a tractor tire in here, I'll handle it. I had never thought of tire explosions in relative terms, though it stood to reason that some would be worse than others. By no means did this put my fears to rest, but still I felt better somehow. What the hell? Live free or bust. Okay, I said. We'll handle it together. How's that? That's a deal, hon. Can I put this down now? Sure, put it down. She said it in a serious way, as if the can of water were some important damaged auto part we'd been discussing. I blessed Mattie's soul for never laughing at any point in this conversation. Better yet, she said, pour it out on those sweet peas. There was a whole set of things I didn't understand about plants, such as why hadn't the sweet peas been killed by the frost. The same boy sped by again on his bike, or possibly a different boy. This time he had a bunch of roses in a white paper funnel tucked under his arm. While the water glugged out over the sweet peas, I noticed Mattie looking at me with her arms crossed, just watching. I missed Mama so much my chest hurt. Turtle had managed to get through her whole life without a book, I suppose, and then had 2 of them bought for her in one day. I got her one called Old MacDonald Had an Apartment House, which showed pictures of Old MacDonald growing celery in window boxes and broccoli in the bathtub and carrots under the living room rug. Old MacDonald's downstairs neighbors could see the carrots popping down through the ceiling. I bought it because it reminded me of Mattie, and because it had stiff pages that I hoped might stand up to Turtle's blood out of turnips grip. While I was downtown, I also looked for a late Valentines card to send Mama. I still felt kind of awful about leaving her, and changing my name just seemed like the final act of betrayal. But Mama didn't see it that way. She said I was smarter than anything to think of Taylor, that it fit me like a pair of washed jeans. She told me she'd always had second thoughts about Marietta. I found just the right card to send her. On the cover, there were hearts, and it said, "Here's hoping you'll soon have something big and strong around the house to open those tight jar lids." Inside was a picture of a pipe wrench. Luanne, meanwhile, had bought one of these Name Your Baby books in the grocery checkout line. When I came home, she had it propped open on the stove and was calling out names from the girls section while she made dinner. Both Turtle and Dwayne Ray were propped up at the table in chairs too big for them. Dwayne Ray's head was all flopped over. He was too little to hold it up by himself, and he was wiggling toward the floor like Snake Man escaping from his basket. Turtle just sat and stared at nothing, or rather at something on the table that was as real to her as Snowboot's invisible poop was to him. Luanne was banging pot lids to wake the dead and boiling bottles. She had stopped nursing and put Dwayne Ray on formula, saying she was petrified that she wouldn't have enough milk for him. "Leandra, Leonie, Leonore, Leslie, Letitia," she called out, watching Turtle over her shoulder as though she expected her to spew out quarters like a slot machine when she hit the right combination of letters. "Lord have mercy," I said. "Have you been doing this all the way from the Agathas and Amy's? Oh, hi. I didn't hear you come in." She acted a little guilty, like a kid caught using swear words. "I thought I'd do half today and the rest tomorrow. You know what? Luanne is on the exact middle page. I wonder if my mother had a book like this." The book our mothers had was the Bible, not some 50-cent dealie they sell from the same rack as the National Enquirer. I knew very well that none of my various names had come out of the Bible, nor Luanne's either, but I didn't care. I was just plain in a bad mood. I put Turtle over my shoulder. "What do you really expect her to do if you say the right name, Luanne? Jump up and scream and kiss you like the people on those game shows?" "Don't be mad at me, Taylor. I'm just trying to help. She worries me. I'm not saying she's dumb, but it seems like she doesn't have too much personality." "Sure she does," I said. "She grabs onto things. That's her personality." "Well, no offense, but that's not personality. Babies do that automatically. I haven't worked in a hospital or anything, but at least I know that much. Personality has to be something you learn. And reading off a list of every name known to humankind is going to teach her to have personality? Taylor, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but all the magazines say that you have to play with children to develop their personality. So, I play with her. I bought her a book today. Okay, you play with her. I'm sorry. Luanne ladled soup out of the big pot on the stove and brought bowls over to the table. Her bowl held about 2 teaspoons of the red-colored broth. She was starving herself to lose the weight she'd gained with Dwayne Ray, which was mostly between her ears as far as I could see. This is Russian cabbage and beet soup, she announced. It's called borscht. It's the beets that turn it pink. You're supposed to put your sour cream on top, but that just seemed like calories up the kazoo. I got it out of Lady's Home Journal. I could imagine her licking her index finger and paging through some magazine called Toasty Winter Family Pleasers, trying to find something to do with all that cabbage I kept bringing home from Maddie's. I fished out a pink potato and mushed it up in Turtle's bowl. It's good, Luanne. Nothing personal. I'm just in a crabby mood. Watch out, there's peas in there. A child's windpipe can be blocked by anything smaller than a golf ball. For Luanne, life itself was a life-threatening enterprise. Nothing on earth was truly harmless. Along with her clip file of Hispanic bank presidents, which she had started to let slide now that Angel was talking divorce, she saved newspaper stories of every imaginable type of freak disaster. Unsuspecting diners in a restaurant decapitated by a falling ceiling fan. Babies fallen headfirst into the beer cooler and drowned in melted ice while the family played frisbee. A housewife and mother of 7 stepping out of a wick and candle store only to be shot through the heart by a misfired high-pressure nail gun at a construction site across the street. To Luanne's way of thinking, this proved not only that ice chests and construction sites were dangerous, but also wick and candle stores and frisbees. I promised her that I wouldn't give Turtle anything smaller than a golf ball. I amused myself by thinking about the cabbage. Would you have to take into account the size of one leaf compressed into golf ball shape? Or could you just consider the size of the entire cabbage and call the whole thing safe? Luanne was fanning a mouthful that was still too hot to swallow. I can just hear what my Granny Logan would say if I tried to feed her Russian cabbage soup. She'd say we were all going to turn communist. Later that night, when the kids were in bed, I realized exactly what was bugging me. The idea of Luanne reading magazines for child-raising tips and recipes, and me coming home grouchy after a hard day's work. We were like some family on a TV commercial, with names like Myrtle and Fred. I could just hear us striking up a conversation about air fresheners. Luanne came in wearing her bathrobe and a blue towel wrapped around her hair. She curled up on the sofa and started flipping through the book of names again. Oh, geez, take this away from me before I start looking at the boys section. There's probably 50,000 names better than Dwayne Ray, and I don't even want to know about them. It's too late now. Luanne, have a beer with me. I want to talk about something, and I don't want you to get offended. She took the beer and sat up like I'd given her an order, and I knew this wasn't going to work. Okay, shoot. The way she said it, you would think I was toting an M16. Luanne, I moved in here because I knew we'd get along. It's nice of you to make dinner for us all and to take care of Turtle sometimes, and I know you mean well, but we're acting like Blondie and Dagwood here. All we need is some ignorant little dog named Spot to fetch me my slippers. It's like we're a family, for Christ's sake. You've got your own life to live, and I've got mine. You don't have to do all this stuff for me. But I want to. But I don't want you to. It was like that. By the time we had worked through our 3rd beers, a bag of deep-fried tortilla chips, a pack of individually wrapped pimento cheese slices, and a can of sardines and mustard, Luanne was crying. I remember saying something like, I never even had an old man. Why would I want to end up acting like one? It's the junk food, I kept thinking. On a diet like this, the bean curd kids would be speaking in tongues. All of a sudden, Luanne went still, with both hands over her mouth. I thought she must be choking, after all her talk about golf balls, and right away thought of the Heimlich maneuver poster on the wall at Maddie's store. That's how often she fed people there. I was trying to remember if you were or were not supposed to slap the person on the back. But then Luanne moved her hands from her mouth to her eyes like two of the three no-evil monkey brothers. Oh, God, she said, I'm drunk. Luanne, you've had 3 beers. That's all it takes. I never drink. I'm scared to death of what might happen. I was interested. This house was full of surprises, but this turned out to be nothing like the cat. Luanne said what she was afraid of was just that she might lose control and do something awful. Like what? I don't know. How do I know? Just something. I feel like the only reason I have any friends at all is because I'm always careful not to say something totally dumb, and if I blow it just one time, then that's it. Luanne, honey, that's a weird theory of friendship. No, I mean it. For the longest time after Angel left, I kept thinking back to this time last August when his friend Manny and his wife Ramona came over and we all went out to the desert to look at the shooting stars. There was supposed to be a whole bunch of them, a shower, they were saying on the news. But we kept waiting, and in the meantime we drank a bottle of Jose Cuervo, plumb down to the worm. The next morning Angel kept saying, Man, can you believe that meteor shower? What, you don't even remember it? I honestly couldn't remember a thing besides looking for the star sapphire from Ramona's ring that had plunked out somewhere. It turned out she'd lost it way before. She found it at home in their dog's dish. Can you believe it? I was trying to fit Angel into some pigeonhole or other in the part of my brain that contained what I knew about men. I liked this new version of Angel, who would go out looking for shooting stars, but hated what I saw of him the next morning, taunting Luanne about something that had probably never even happened. Maybe he was pulling your leg, I said. Maybe there never was any meteor shower. Did you ask Ramona? No, I never thought of that. I just assumed. Well, why don't you call her up and ask? She and Manny moved to San Diego, she wailed. You'd think they had moved for the whole purpose of keeping this information from Luanne. Well, I'm sorry, she persisted. But that's not even really the point. It wasn't just that I'd missed something important. I kept on thinking that if I could miss a whole meteor shower, well, I'd probably done something else ridiculous. For all I know, I could have run naked through the desert singing Skip to My Lou. I shuddered. All those spiny pears and prickly watsits. She stared mournfully into the empty bag of chips. And now it's Valentine's Day, she said, and everybody else in the whole wide world is home with their husbands smooching on the couch and watching TV, but not Luanne. No, sir. I ran off both my husband and the TV. I couldn't even think where to begin on this one. I thought of another one of Mama's hog sayings, hogs go deaf at harvest time. It meant that people would only hear what they wanted to hear. Mama was raised on a hog farm. Luanne looked abnormally flattened against the back of the sofa. I thought of her father, who, she told me, was killed when his tractor overturned. They'd found him pressed into a mud bank, and when they pulled him out, he left a perfect print. A daddy print, she'd called it. And she'd wanted to fill the hole with plaster of Paris to keep him, the way she'd done with her handprint in school for Mother's Day. I always wondered if that night we got drunk had something to do with why I lost him, she said. I was confused for a second, still thinking of her father. I thought you were glad when Angel left. I guess I was, but still, you know, something went wrong. You're supposed to love the same person your whole life long till death do you part and all that. And if you don't, well, you've got to have screwed up somewhere. Luanne, you read too many magazines. I went into the kitchen and checked the refrigerator for about the 15th time that night. It was still the same, cabbages and peanut butter. I opened the cabinet and peered behind the cans of refried beans and tomato sauce. There was a bottle of black strap molasses, a box of quick hominy grits, and a can of pink salmon. I considered all of these in various combinations, then settled for another bag of tortilla chips. This is what happens to people without TVs, I thought. They die of junk food. When I came back to the living room, she was still depressed about Angel. "I'll tell you my theory about staying with one man your whole life long," I said. "Do you know what a flapper ball is?" She perked up. "A water ball?" "Flapper ball. It's that doo-jobby in a toilet tank that goes up and down when you flush. It shuts the water off." "Oh." "So, one time when I was working in this motel, one of the toilets leaked and I had to replace the flapper ball. Here's what it said on the package. I kept it till I knew it by heart. Please note, parts are included for all installations, but no installation requires all of the parts. That's kind of my philosophy about men. I don't think there's an installation out there that could use all of my parts. Luanne covered her mouth to hide a laugh. I wondered who had ever told her laughing was a federal offense. I'm serious now. I'm talking mental capacity and everything, not just parts like what they cut chicken into. But this time she was laughing out loud. I tell you my most personal, darkest secret, and you laugh, I said, playing vexed. They can always use a breast or a thigh or a leg, but nobody wants the scroungy old neck bones. Don't forget the wings, I said. They always want to gobble up your wings right off the bat. I dumped the rest of the bag of the chips out into the bowl on the ottoman between us. I was actually thinking about going for the jar of peanut butter. Here, let me show you this Valentines card I got from Mama, I said, digging through my purse until I found it. But Luanne was already having such a fit of giggles I could just as well have shown her the electric bill, and she would have thought it was the funniest thing in recorded history. Oh, me, she said, letting the card fall into her lap. Her voice trailed down from all those high-pitched laughs like a prom queen floating down the gymnasium stairs. I could use me a good wrench around here, or better yet, one of them. What do you call 'em? That one that's shaped like a weenie? I had no idea what she meant. A caulking gun? An angle drill? A battery head cleaner? Come to think of it, just about every tool was shaped like either a weenie or a pistol, depending on your point of view. The Washington Monument? I said. This set Luanne off again. If there really had been a law against laughing, both of us would have been on our way to Sing Sing by now. Oh, Lordy! They ought to put that on a Valentine's card, she said. I can just see me sending something like that to my mama. She'd have a cow right there on the kitchen floor, and Granny Logan jumping and twisting her hands saying, What is it? I don't get it. She'd go running after the mailman and tell him, Young man, come back in here this minute. Ask Ivy what's supposed to be so funny. Oh, Lordy, Lordy, Luanne said again, drying her eyes. She put a chip in her mouth with a flourish, licking each of her fingers afterward. She was draped out on the sofa in her green terry bathrobe and blue turban like Cleopatra cruising down the Nile, with snow boots curled at her feet like some insane royal pet. In ancient Egypt, I'd read somewhere, schizophrenics were worshipped as gods. I'll tell you one thing, Luanne said. When something was bugging Angel, he'd never have stayed up half the night with me, talking and eating everything that wasn't nailed down. You're not still mad, are you? I held up 2 fingers. Peace, sister, I said, knowing full well that only a complete hillbilly would say this in the 1980s. Love beads came to Pittman the same year as the dial tone. Peace and love, get high and fly with the dove, she said.